Always trust.
We ask the questions.
What is needed in the world?
Is that going to
Naučnik iz oblasti jezika i informacijskih tehnologija Federico Gobbo za Al Jazeeru govori o ljudskoj konverzaciji s vještačkom inteligencijom, zbog čega ne smijemo ChatGPT i DeepSeek koristiti za istraživanja ili provjere činjenica, te kako su te aplikacije namijenjene isključivo konverzaciji, a ne edukaciji ili informisanju. Gobbo vjeruje da možemo učiniti da tehnologija služi nama, a ne mi njoj. Kako bismo to uspjeli, moramo nadmudriti algoritme i njihove kreatore.
Professor Gobbo, welcome to Sarajevo and the Al Jazeera Balkans program.
Thank you for your kind invitation.
So before we start to speak about the artificial intelligence and languages, let's talk about the peculiar one that you speak, and that's Esperanto. Can you tell us more about the language?
Yes, of course. Yes. I speak Esperanto for many years. I started speaking that in 1995, so now it's a lot of years, 30 years actually. And unlike other languages, Esperanto was a made-up language as a project, and it became a living language because it was adopted by people. So it's a language that is not grounded in a specific nationality or ethnicity. It's an international language.
It's supranational.
It's supranational, exactly. That's the main thing. And unlike many other projects, it became a full-fledged living language. You have families speaking the language. You can speak in Esperanto about all the topics that you want, like other languages. So yeah, you have also jargon, you have archaisms, you have everything that you find in other languages, which is very nice because it seems to be a kind of miracle in a sense that Esperanto can all the time being passed through generations, because unlike let's say the languages that we're used to talk about, in which the family is the main thing, in the case of Esperanto is the activism which passes the most of the Esperanto speakers. So each generation has to give to other volunteers for being activists for the language itself. So this is incredible in a sense, because we have 5 or maybe 6 generations of Esperanto speakers. It was published at first in 1887, so if you made your calculations, it's almost 1.5 centuries.
What was the golden age of Esperanto?
The golden age of Esperanto was in the Belle Époque. So when it was adopted by the French and the Francophonie, because also Geneva was a hub. There was 2 hubs, Geneva and Paris. In the time in the Belle Époque, when Paris was the center of the world, everything was happening in Paris. The Exposition Universelle, the Tour Eiffel, the lift, the telephone, the telegraph, the mass tourism, everything was happening there as new technologies and new innovation for the modernity in a period where positivism was the main philosophical stance. What does it mean? In the age of positivism, technology was considered a good thing per se. So if you have more technology, you have more peace, more understanding between nations and so on. Of course, that was completely ruined by the First World War, because we used technology to kill people,
exactly.
Especially chemical weapons.
As we do it now.
Yes, we do it now, of course. So that was the end of positivism, but at that time really there was this hope.
So what happened afterwards, and where is Esperanto now? How many sympathizers or speakers are there?
So after the First World War, Esperanto was reinvented each generation, and it was adopted by different, let's say, social movement, social avant-gardes, from the suffragette for women's vote, to the ecumenical movement for Christians, or the anarchist and leftist movement for being the Latin of the proletarians, or whatever. Each time is reinvented. And nowadays, Esperanto had a spike up during the COVID because people were blocked in their houses, in their apartments, and they wanted to have a mental challenge. And so they say, why not to have more contacts through the computers and learn Esperanto language for free without moving. And with Esperanto you can do that.
Is this the period where Duolingo users of Esperanto hit the 1,067,000?
Yes,
okay.
That was the period, exactly. That was so. It's paradoxical because COVID was one of the most difficult moments in the world for most people on the earth, but for Esperanto it was a blessing. So this is the paradox. And you asked me about sympathizers and so on. So we can, I always use the metaphor of circles. You have an inner circles of Esperanto families, 1,000. Then you have another circle with activists, 10,000, 20,000 people you can count because you pay fees to associations, they active and so on. Then you have 100,000 speakers that are, let's say, a bit more lazy in a sense. And then you have the millions of Duolingo.
So in total, it's a high number.
Yes, yes, a relatively high number, yes.
You mentioned technology, so let's talk about these new technologies, including augmented and virtual reality, but also brain-machine interfaces.
Yeah.
How will this change the way we use language?
So I think that we are facing now something that we faced before with machine translation, when machine translation started to become very, let's say, effective. We had to adapt and adopt. We had to adapt our jobs in languages and our approach to languages, adopting the new technology. So in the case of high education, like my field, we had to integrate machine translation. We cannot ignore it. So we had to change our assessment. We had to accept that it should be a fair use of these technologies. So banning is not a solution. But adapting and adopting is a solution. Now we are at the same verge with the generative artificial intelligence and all these immersive environments, virtual environments in which you can literally be in another linguistic and physical virtual space, which give you a lot of opportunity to learn the language in a natural way by immersion.
How does that look like?
This is, I think, something you can really think about like a new learning environment. So instead
literally environment.
Yes. Exactly. Instead of writing a book describing a situation, you just build up the situation. And in the situation, you can just point out the things, and then you have the words popping up and all these things. It's amazing if you think about that.
Let's talk about the fault lines of this technology. False translation, machine translation, could lead to human misunderstandings.
Yes.
Which can lead then to a lot of conflicts. So it's similar to fake news. By the time you realize it was fake, the damage has been already done, and sometimes it affects entire population.
Well, these are two different levels. So one level is we have to learn how to use the language. So adopting a technology. So adopting a technology, it means that you have to understand how the technology works. So when we were naive about machine translation, we just trusted the machine. Then we learned that the machine makes some patterns of errors. So we have to think about that as they are auxiliary tools. They do not have to substitute humans, but humans have to interact with these tools in an active way. Interact and correct, exactly. The same thing is what is happening now. We are still in an infancy stage. So we are still very naive. And still, when the technology is new, it's kind of aura of magic. So we are in the aura of magic of generative AI. And so we say, wow, it's wonderful. Yes, but. And then you understand that hallucination is one of the big problems, meaning that generative AI invents lies in order to please the user. And so we have to be very careful not to trust it. And this is also an antidote to the fake deep news and all these kind of things.
We will talk more about the hallucinations because basically the term has another meaning to people that are not really into technology terminology.
Yeah, this is a bit, yes, you're right, this is a bit jargon. For example, if you ask a chatbot to clarify to you a grammatical rule, it can omit the exceptions, or it can give you an example of a verb that does not exist. Just because the machine, in a sense, believes that this is what you want.
Because of the chatbots are actually inclined to give us the answers that will suit our bias?
Exactly, they want to confirm our biases. And so they don't care about the notion of truth. They want to continue the conversation with you. And so that's why we have to be very careful about that. We have to be careful on how to make questions. If we learn how to make questions, we can spot the errors. If we are naive and too generic with our questions, then we receive generic answer that may be truthful or not. And this is what we have to avoid.
But it's also the way to create illusion, as you said, a hallucination that your view is the righteous one.
Yeah.
There is also one issue then that is being, that emerged with this, and that's creating the echo chambers.
Yeah.
How dangerous is this?
Well, this is very dangerous, the echo chamber effect, because it is, in a sense, in the zeitgeist. So we live in a world with technology aside of generative AI, in which we live in our bubbles, in the social media bubbles. We tend to search, to look for confirmation of what we already know. And we tend not to be surprised by new information. And this is the algorithm of social media, and that's why then we have only exposure to news that we believe in a priori, and this is the same thing. So the echo chamber effect by generative AI is just a step more in that direction, and this is very dangerous to me, because I see that people using generative AI are not conscious of that. The fact that the echo chamber effect really gives you back what you expect. But what we expect is not what we need. Sometimes we need something that we do not expect, and even something that we do not want. I mean, it's like thought love with a child. Sometimes you have to say no. It's easier to say yes, as a parent. Say, okay, no. If you always say no, that's not good. And you have to give explanation and answer, maybe even anger. Computers are not parents. They do not do that. They do not love. So they just are mirrors. And mirroring us as humans is something that is not always the good choice for us.
But is it on people to be technologically, of course, savvy and educated, or is it on the big tech to adjust the algorithm to be more human-friendly?
That's a very good question.
Or knowledge-friendly?
That's a very good question. So I think that we have double responsibility. So we, as educators, because I think that myself as an educator, being a university professor, we have the moral duty to teach and to make people savvy about that. So, and in general, society should do that. So this is a very important part. And this is, if you want, this is a kind of public duty, public policy duty. Big tech should not be responsible of public policy, in my view. And this means that they have, on the other hand, they have a moral duty to be fair and not to give something that harms society and citizens.
But it's also business responsibility, not just moral responsibility.
Exactly. So how to do that? There are some attempts now in order to double check with retrieval augmented generation algorithms the results in order to limit the fake answers, giving kind of knowledge base that double check.
To limit the hallucinations?
Yes.
Okay.
But these are experiments, nice experiments, but for some months. So we don't know how far, because the problem of every knowledge base is that knowledge base is by definition limited in the scopus. So if you ask something out of the domain of the knowledge base is useless.
You need more skills.
Well, we need, you know, maybe we need to ask the chatbot to announce to the chatbot what we are talking about as topic. In this way, the chatbot can immediately go to the right knowledge base. I mean, if you ask something, I'm thinking about something sensitive, like for example, medical information. If we ask a chatbot about medical information, so about your health, it's very dangerous if it says something wrong, you know, and you trust it. So this is the kind of thing that's
so you have to lead the algorithm to better lead you.
Yes, that's in short what we have to do. And this is something that we already experienced with the so-called expert systems in AI, in the old-fashioned AI 20 years ago, when these systems were assisting doctors for diagnosis. And that was one of the problems, because what if the machine gives you a wrong diagnosis? Where is the responsibility?
It's shared responsibility.
Yeah, but where to share it? It's something which is absolutely non-trivial, let's say.
Especially because many people use ChatGPT, DeepSeek right now, and generally generative artificial intelligence for Google search. And why is this dangerous, apart from doing a medical inquiry?
Well, because the algorithm for behind all chatbots is not a search algorithm. The machine is built up for a different purpose. It's built up for conversational purposes. So using a generative AI tool as if it were a search engine is really a gross mistake. Something that I have seen among students.
Exactly.
I mean, university students are kind of well educated in the terms, sociological terms, and this is something that I still don't know how to really correct in a sense. And also in the case of DeepSeek, there is even the, because you mentioned that, there is even the button used as a search engine. No, this is not good at all, because this encourages people to use DeepSeek as a search engine, but it's not. Because the results can be something that you find, like Google, but it can be something that is created
as you said, hallucinated, fake, false, confirms our biases.
Yeah.
Okay.
There is a very famous case about a lawyer that asked in the first months of ChatGPT references for a court case, and then he used the references in the court case, and then the judge say, where is this reference, it was completely invented. He was radiated by the...
Which directly affects the person at the end of this.
Of course, he's not anymore a lawyer, have lost his job.
Not just the lawyer, but the person that the case was about.
Luckily, the judge controlled every reference, say, this court case does not exist, and then he had to admit that he has used.
So how does the academic community tackle this challenge with ChatGPT, DeepSeek, and Gen AI?
Well, I cannot speak in the name of the whole academic community, but...
Your university, at least.
Yeah, well, my university, University of Amsterdam, still lacks, let's say, a solid guideline. We are working on that. So by now there is a kind of advice, which is something that it's very inside the Dutch culture to give advices, not to give rules. And the advice is don't use it, but learn how it works. Very pragmatic oriented advice in a very Dutch way. And there are colleagues in that are especially in the field of artificial intelligence research that are working with experts in ethics and philosophy together in order to build up something. But it's an ongoing conversation because...
Did they come up with the 5 priorities for research when using AI?
Well, yeah, they came up with for research, but not for using in teaching still. Mm-hmm. So in research is easier in a sense. Why? Because it is supposed the researchers are well, let's say, trained about problems in doing research. And that's why, I mean, there are very reasonable advices, and these work very well. But the point is, cascading in the population of students, this is more difficult. So we have now some guidelines from the European Union, which are too vague for me, but it's a start. I mean, it's so quick. I mean, what happened? We are now in 2025, and the first thing is 2022, and now it's spread up so many different technologies or technology instances of the same technological idea, but also there are a lot of differences. I have now under my schedule a comparison between DeepSeek and ChatGPT and how they behave differently on the same questions.
Yeah, I think somebody started a battle also, ChatGPT versus DeepSeek, and the outcome was...
Yeah, this is very, I mean, conflicting. I'm doing something more, let's say, a double-blind study. So,
what were the results?
Well, I'm doing that, so I cannot tell definitive results, but it's true that...
what are the differences then?
The differences is kind of provisional results, so don't take me that as completely finished results. My impression, and I have to finish the analysis, is that ChatGPT has more skills in give you different information, while DeepSeek is more, let's say, friendly in the language. So there is more echo chamber on one side and more search engine in the other side as problems. So they're a bit different on that. But this is, by now, I have to repeat the study after 1 month and see what happens, because they are continually trained. And of course, DeepSeek was exactly coming out because of challenging the other, and so they will study one the other.
Actually learn and fight each other.
Yes.
Learn from and fight each other. So because we're coming quite close to the end of the interview, is it possible then, to having all this said, to change the direction or regulate new technologies, especially in terms of language?
Yes, I think it's possible. I think we have to do it. And it's a very complex problem. It's a very complex issue. We have to to put our best brains all together with different, let's say, background to tackle the problem from different angles. But we have absolutely to do it, and we have to do it fast. Because we cannot leave this in the hand only of the big techs. Because this is, at first, a problem of public policy, and that can shape again the whole concept of democracy. And I think this is, in our times, is very important to make sure that democracy can still be effective and well alive in the present and next future.
When you speak about democracy, you are thinking of being exposed and having the approach to the right information.
Yes.
Not
yes.
hallucinations and not echo chambers.
Exactly.
Okay. Professor Gobbo, thank you for talking to Al Jazeera.
Thank you for inviting me.
We ask the question.
What is needed in the world?